Welcome to Dreamy History. Imagine a civilization so ancient, so vast, and so meticulously organized that its ruins still baffle archaeologists today. We're not talking about the pyramids of Egypt or the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, though those are undeniably impressive. We're venturing much, much further east, to a land where cities thrived with advanced plumbing and urban planning. Centuries before Rome was even a cluster of mud huts. This is the story of ancient India, a tale that begins not with kings and empires, but with the quiet whispers of forgotten rivers and the methodical construction of brick-lined homes. Here's the thing that often blows people's minds. For nearly 2,000 years, a civilization flourished across an area larger than Western Europe, stretching from modern-day Afghanistan to Gujarat in India. And yet, for millennia, it was completely lost to human memory. Its cities lay buried under shifting sands and river silt, its intricate writing system undeciphered, its very existence a blank page in the grand narrative of history. Until the 1920s, the story of India began with the Vedic Age, around 1500 BCE. But beneath the surface, a far older, far more enigmatic world was waiting to be rediscovered. A world of sophisticated engineering, peaceful trade, and a profound connection to water that still echoes in the subcontinent today. It's a paradox, one of the largest ancient civilizations, yet one of the least understood. If you're enjoying this journey through history, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And I'm always curious. Drop a comment letting me know what city and time zone you're watching from. There's something special about knowing this story is reaching people all over the world. Here's the often overlooked truth about the history of India. It doesn't begin with grand invasions or mythical kings, but with a quiet revolution in agriculture, thousands of years before the first pharaoh ruled Egypt. Most people jump straight to the Indus Valley Civilization, but that highly advanced urban society didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was built upon millennia of slow, steady innovation, starting in places like Mehrgarh, a small settlement nestled in the foothills of what is now Balochistan, Pakistan. This is where the story truly begins, in a place that laid the foundational stones for an entire subcontinent's future. Around 7000 BCE, as ice sheets were still retreating in parts of the world, Mehrgarh was already a bustling agricultural community. Think about that for a second. This predates the earliest known farming villages in Mesopotamia by at least 1,000 years. The people of Mehrgarh weren't just hunter-gatherers, they were actively cultivating barley and wheat, herding sheep, goats, and cattle. We know this from the carbonized grains and animal bones found in their layered archaeological sites. Their homes were simple mud brick structures, often divided into 4 rooms, perhaps for storage or family units. Over centuries, these early settlers developed sophisticated techniques, not just for farming, but also for crafting tools from stone and bone, and even creating rudimentary pottery. By 5500 BCE, they were making exquisite beads from lapis lazuli and turquoise, materials sourced from distant mountain ranges, indicating early trade networks. This wasn't just survival, it was the slow, deliberate construction of a complex society, one small mud brick at a time. It's in these foundational layers of Mehrgarh that we see the very first whispers of what would become the vast and sophisticated civilizations of ancient India. Now fast forward a few millennia from Mehrgarh's quiet agricultural revolution to something truly astonishing, The emergence of the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization, around 2600 BCE. This is where the story gets genuinely interesting. Imagine a vast expanse of land, larger than any other contemporary civilization, stretching over 1 million square kilometers, encompassing hundreds of settlements, from small villages to monumental cities like Harappa and Mohenjedaro. What's genuinely weird about these cities is their uniformity and meticulous planning. They weren't sprawling organic growths. They were deliberately laid out on a grid system, with wide main streets and narrower lanes, all oriented along cardinal directions. This wasn't the work of a single king or emperor, but suggests a powerful centralized authority or a deeply ingrained cultural understanding of urban design. Take Mohenjo-Daro, for instance, a city that could have housed 40,000 people. Its residential buildings were often 2 stories high, built with fired bricks of a standardized size, a detail that speaks volumes about the level of organization. And inside these homes, private bathrooms. Yes, private bathrooms, complete with drains connected to an extensive municipal sewage system that ran beneath the streets, emptying into sumps outside the city. This level of sanitation and public health infrastructure wouldn't be seen again in many parts of the world until the Roman Empire nearly 2 millennia later. This is where the pleasant exhaustion begins to set in. The sheer density of unexpected details. Every single house had access to water from private wells, dug deep into the earth. The city even featured a massive public structure, the Great Bath, a watertight tank measuring about 12 meters long, 7 meters wide, and 2.4 meters deep, likely used for ritual bathing, fed by a well and drained by a large outlet. This wasn't just functional, it was monumental, a testament to their engineering prowess and perhaps their spiritual practices. What's more, these cities lacked any obvious signs of monumental palaces, grand temples, or elaborate royal tombs that characterize other ancient civilizations. There are no colossal statues of rulers, no gold-filled burial chambers. This has led many historians to speculate about a surprisingly egalitarian society, or at least one where power was distributed differently, perhaps through a council of elders or a priestly class, rather than a single autocratic ruler. The focus seems to have been on public works, trade, and communal well-being. Their unique writing system, etched onto square or rectangular steatite seals, remains undeciphered, a tantalizing mystery that holds the key to their inner world. These seals, often depicting animals like the unicorn-like bull or the tiger, were likely used in trade, pressed into clay to mark goods. And about that trade, it was extensive. Harappan artifacts have been found in Mesopotamia, and Mesopotamian goods in Indus Valley sites, indicating a thriving network of exchange, probably by sea and overland, bringing in precious materials like lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, carnelian from Gujarat, and metals from Rajasthan. They were pioneers in cotton cultivation and textile production, supplying these goods to the wider ancient world. The Indus Valley Civilization at its peak was a marvel of human ingenuity and social organization. Its people lived in well-planned cities, enjoyed advanced sanitation, engaged in extensive trade, and developed a unique cultural identity, all while seemingly avoiding the centralized, often brutal, monarchies of their contemporaries. They built durable infrastructure that lasted for centuries, demonstrating a profound understanding of materials and engineering. Their stability and prosperity were remarkable, sustained for nearly 1,000 years. But even the most resilient civilizations face challenges, and the story of the Indus Valley is also one of a gradual enigmatic decline. For reasons still debated by scholars, ranging from climate change affecting the monsoon patterns and the drying up of the mighty Saraswati River, to tectonic shifts and even disease, the great cities of the Indus began to wane around 1900 BCE. People started to abandon the large urban centres, moving into smaller, more rural settlements. The standardised weights and measures, the uniform brick sizes, the intricate drainage systems, all these hallmarks of Harappan efficiency slowly disappeared. The grand experiment in urban living, so successful for so long, began to unravel, leaving behind a profound mystery. But that unravelling wasn't the end of India's story. It was merely a transition, a clearing of the stage for new cultures and new ideas to emerge from the fertile plains and river valleys. And that, my friends, is a story for the next chapter. We left our incredible journey with a mystery, didn't we? The colossal, sophisticated Indus Valley Civilization, after nearly a millennium of unparalleled stability, began to unravel around 1900 BCE. The grand cities, with their meticulously planned streets and advanced drainage systems, slowly faded. People abandoned their urban centres. The standardized weights and measures vanished, and that enigmatic, undeciphered script fell silent. What happened? Where did everyone go? Here's the thing that often blows people's minds. It wasn't a sudden cataclysmic event that wiped out an entire civilization in one fell swoop. Instead, think of it as a slow, agonizing transformation, a gradual decentralization. The mighty Indus, the lifeblood of that civilization, shifted its course. Monsoons, once reliable, became erratic, bringing either devastating floods or crippling droughts. Tectonic shifts might have played a role, altering river flows and making certain areas uninhabitable. Climate change, my friends, is not a new phenomenon, and it profoundly impacted these ancient peoples. As the great urban centres became unsustainable, people didn't simply vanish, they migrated. They moved east, they moved south, carrying fragments of their culture, their agricultural knowledge, their artisan skills, and their collective memory to new regions. The vibrant interconnected tapestry of the Harappan world began to fray, its threads scattering across the subcontinent, reweaving into new, smaller regional cultures. We see archaeological evidence of this, pottery styles changing, new settlement patterns emerging, but often with echoes of the Harappan past. It's like a grand river splitting into countless smaller streams, each carving its own path, yet all originating from the same source. And this, my friends, is where our story takes another fascinating turn, one that will profoundly shape the future of ancient India. Because as the Indus Valley Civilization was undergoing its slow, enigmatic decline, another powerful cultural force was beginning to make its presence felt in the subcontinent. Imagine, if you will, the vast open steppes of Central Asia, stretching like an endless canvas under an immense sky. Around the same time that Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were experiencing their twilight, groups of people, whom we often refer to as Indo-Aryans, began a series of migrations. Now, let's be super clear here. This wasn't an invasion in the sense of a conquering army sweeping in to destroy and dominate. the current scholarly consensus points more towards a process of diffusion, a gradual movement of pastoralist groups, their language and their cultural practices interacting with and integrating into the existing populations of the subcontinent over centuries. These Indo-Aryans were different from the Harappans in many ways. While the Harappans were urban dwellers, deeply rooted in sophisticated agriculture and trade, these new arrivals were primarily pastoralists. Their wealth wasn't measured in granaries or intricate city plans, but in cattle. Think about that for a second. A society whose entire economy and social structure revolved around herds of cows, which provided milk, butter, hides, and even served as a primary form of currency. They were semi-nomadic, moving their herds across vast distances, following pastures and water sources, and they brought with them something truly revolutionary for the region: the horse. And not just the horse, but the horse-drawn chariot. What's genuinely weird is that while the Harappans had domesticated animals, there's no clear evidence of the horse in their civilization. The arrival of these swift, powerful animals, harnessed to light, spoked-wheel chariots, would have been a game-changer, fundamentally altering warfare, travel, and even the very rhythm of life. Imagine the sight. These chariots, ridden by warriors thundering across the plains, an image that would become iconic in their foundational texts. These people also brought with them a new language, Sanskrit. This isn't just any language, it's an ancient Indo-European tongue, a linguistic cousin to Latin, Greek, Persian, and many modern European languages. It's a language of incredible beauty, complexity, and precision, destined to become the sacred language of India, the vehicle for its profound philosophies and spiritual traditions, but perhaps their most significant contribution, the one that truly marks the beginning of a new era in Indian history, was their oral tradition, the Vedas. These aren't just stories. They're a vast collection of hymns, prayers, philosophical treatises, and ritualistic formulas, meticulously composed, memorized, and transmitted orally from generation to generation for centuries before ever being written down. Think about the sheer intellectual discipline required for that. It's an oral library, preserved perfectly through the power of human memory. The earliest and most important of these is the Rig Veda, a collection of over 1,000 hymns dedicated to a pantheon of powerful natural deities. We're talking about Indra, the thunderbolt-wielding warrior god, king of the heavens, Agni, the fire god, mediator between humans and the divine, and Surya, the sun god, dispenser of light and life. These hymns speak of a vibrant, dynamic world, filled with ritual sacrifices, cosmic battles, and profound reverence for the forces of nature. They provide us with an unparalleled window into the beliefs, customs, and social organization of the early Vedic period, which stretches roughly from 1500 BCE to 1000 BCE. In this early phase, society was organized into tribal units, called jana, led by a rajan, or chief. These chiefs weren't absolute monarchs in the later sense. They were leaders chosen for their bravery in battle and their ability to protect the tribe and its cattle. There was a strong sense of community, and the focus was on collective well-being, often expressed through elaborate rituals performed by priests or Brahmins who held immense spiritual authority. The social structure, while not yet rigid, began to show early signs of the Varna system, with distinctions emerging between priests, warriors, commoners, and a class of labourers. As we move into the later Vedic period, roughly from 1000 BCE to 600 BCE, things start to shift again. The Indo-Aryans began to settle down more permanently, moving further east into the fertile Gangetic plains. This eastward expansion was facilitated by a crucial technological innovation: iron. The discovery and mastery of iron metallurgy allowed them to clear dense forests, turning previously unusable land into rich agricultural fields. Iron ploughs made farming more efficient, leading to surplus food production. This agricultural surplus had profound consequences. It meant that not everyone had to be a farmer or a pastoralist. Specialization increased, leading to the growth of crafts, trade, and eventually the re-emergence of towns and cities. The tribal janas started to coalesce into larger, more complex political entities called janapadas, or territorial states. The Rajan evolved from a tribal chief into something closer to a king, whose power was based not just on personal charisma, but on control over land and resources. The social structure also became more formalized and hierarchical during this period. The Varna system solidified, dividing society into four main categories: the Brahmins, priests and scholars; the Kshatriyas, rulers and warriors; the Vaishyas, merchants and farmers; and the Shudras, laborers and service providers. While initially based on occupation and aptitude, this system gradually became hereditary, laying the groundwork for the later caste system. But the later Vedic period wasn't just about political and social restructuring. It was also a time of intense intellectual and philosophical ferment. While the earlier Vedas focused on rituals and external sacrifices to appease the gods, a new wave of thought emerged, encapsulated in the Upanishads. These profound texts, often composed as dialogues between teachers and students, delve into the nature of reality, the self, Atman, and the ultimate truth, Brahman. They question the efficacy of ritual alone and emphasize inner contemplation, spiritual knowledge, and the concept of karma and reincarnation. Think about that for a second. A profound shift in human thought, moving from external appeasement to internal exploration, from tribal identity to universal principles. This was a period of deep philosophical inquiry, laying the very foundations for Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, traditions that would shape not only India, but the entire world. The Upanishads represent a spiritual revolution, asking questions that still resonate with us today. Who am I? What is my purpose? What is the nature of existence? So we've journeyed from the fading echoes of a great lost civilization to the vibrant, dynamic emergence of new cultures, new languages, new technologies, and groundbreaking philosophies. We've seen the subcontinent transform from urban centres to pastoral communities, and then back towards a new kind of urbanization, driven by iron and agriculture. We've witnessed the birth of the Vedic tradition, a powerful cultural force that would become the bedrock of Indian civilization for millennia. As the later Vedic period draws to a close around 600 BCE, the stage is set for yet another dramatic transformation. The Janapadas, those nascent territorial states, are growing in power and ambition. The fertile Gangetic plains are bustling with activity. New ideas are circulating, and the seeds of mighty empires are being sown. We're on the cusp of an age of even greater political consolidation, new religious movements, and the rise of some of the most iconic figures in ancient Indian history. And believe me, you are not going to want to miss what happens next. We left off with the Janapadas, these fledgling territorial states, flexing their muscles, growing in power and ambition across the fertile Gangetic plains. But here's the thing about power. It rarely stays fragmented for long. Just like water seeking the lowest point, political influence tends to coalesce, to centralize, to become something far grander. And that, my friends, is precisely what we're about to witness. Welcome to what historians affectionately call the second urbanization of ancient India, a period roughly spanning from 600 BCE to 300 BCE. If the Indus Valley Civilization was the first magnificent flowering of urban life, then this era is its spiritual successor, born from a completely different set of circumstances and laying the groundwork for virtually everything that follows in Indian history. Think about it. The Vedic people, armed with iron, had tamed the dense forests of the Ganga-Yamuna Doab, turning vast swathes of wilderness into incredibly productive agricultural land. This wasn't just about growing more food. It was about generating surpluses. And what do surpluses lead to? Specialization, trade, wealth, and ultimately bigger, more complex societies. The Janapadas began to swallow each other, not always through brute force, but often through strategic alliances, economic leverage, and the sheer magnetic pull of success. The result? 16 truly massive, powerful states emerged, stretching across northern India like a necklace of burgeoning empires. We call these the Mahajanapadas, literally. Quote 3. Imagine the landscape shifting before your very eyes. Where once there were tribal settlements, now you see bustling cities rising from the plains. These weren't just overgrown villages. They were true urban centres, often fortified, with administrative buildings, artisan quarters, and vibrant marketplaces. Trade routes, both overland and riverine, became arteries pumping lifeblood, goods, ideas, and people across the subcontinent. We're talking about a level of complexity and organisation that would have made the early Vedic Rajan scratch his head in wonder. This was a world of professional armies, sophisticated tax systems, and burgeoning bureaucracies. Each Mahajanapada had its own character, its own strengths. Kashi was known for its textiles, Kosala for its agricultural wealth, Gandhara for its strategic location linking India to Central Asia. But amongst these 16 titans, one state began to outshine all others, a beacon of power that would eventually dominate the entire northern Indian landscape. We're talking about Magadha. Now, why Magadha? What made this particular Mahajanapada, nestled in the eastern Gangetic plains, so uniquely positioned for supremacy? Well, let's unpack that, because it's a masterclass in geographical determinism and strategic foresight. Firstly, Magadha possessed an unparalleled agricultural bounty. Its lands were incredibly fertile, fed by the Ganges and its tributaries, allowing for multiple harvests a year. This meant a constant supply of food, a large population base, and the ability to feed a large standing army. Secondly, and perhaps even more crucially, Magadha had access to vital natural resources that its rivals lacked: iron ore. The Chota Nagpur Plateau, just to its south, was a veritable treasure trove of iron. Think about what that means. Superior tools for agriculture, allowing for even greater land clearance and food production. But more importantly, it meant superior weapons. Swords, spears, and chariots crafted from high-quality iron gave Magadhan armies a decisive edge in battle. Thirdly, its geography offered natural defences. Its early capitals, like Rajagriha, modern Rajgir, were surrounded by 5 hills, making them easily defensible. Later, Pataliputra, modern Patna, its most famous capital, was strategically located at the confluence of the Ganges, Sund, and Gandak rivers. Imagine trying to attack a city protected by such massive waterways. It was an impregnable fortress, a commercial hub, and a strategic choke point all rolled into one. Finally, Magadha was led by a series of ambitious, often ruthless, but undeniably brilliant rulers who understood the game of power. The Harappa dynasty, for instance, saw kings like Bimbisara and his son Ajatashatru expand Magadhan influence through a combination of diplomacy, strategic marriages, and outright conquest. Bimbisara in particular was a shrewd politician, forging alliances and absorbing smaller states, laying the foundation for a truly expansive kingdom. Ajatashatru, his successor, was even more aggressive, conquering Kosala and Kashi, solidifying Magadha's position as the dominant power. He even famously used a new type of war machine, a catapult-like device for breaking down city walls, and a chariot with a mace attached to its wheels, demonstrating a relentless drive for military innovation. As Magadha grew, so did the complexity of its society. The Varna system, which had solidified during the later Vedic period, continued to evolve. While Brahmins still held immense spiritual and intellectual authority, the rise of powerful kings and vast urban centres meant that the Kshatriyas, warriors and rulers, and Vaishyas, merchants and farmers, gained significant practical influence. The Shudras, labourers and service providers, formed the backbone of the economy, their labour supporting the entire edifice. What's fascinating, and perhaps a little unsettling, is how this period of intense political consolidation and urbanization also sparked an extraordinary intellectual and spiritual revolution. Think about it. When societies undergo rapid change, when old certainties are challenged by new realities, people start asking deeper questions. The Vedic rituals, once central to life, began to feel insufficient for many. The rigid social hierarchy, the emphasis on sacrifices performed by Brahmins, and the abstract nature of some Upanishadic concepts left a spiritual void for those seeking more direct paths to understanding and liberation. And into this ferment stepped 2 of the most influential figures in human history, Mahavira and Siddhartha Gautama. These were the leaders of the Shramani movements, ascetics and wanderers who challenged the established Vedic order. They weren't just philosophers, they were radical reformers, offering alternative worldviews and paths to spiritual enlightenment that resonated deeply with the changing society. Let's start with Jainism, spearheaded by Mahavira, who lived from approximately 599 BCE to 527 BCE. He was the 24th and last Tirthankara, or ford maker, in a long line of spiritual teachers. Mahavira preached a doctrine of extreme asceticism, non-violence, ahimsa, towards all living beings, and the belief that liberation from the cycle of rebirth, samsara, could be achieved through self-control, penance, and strict ethical conduct. His followers, the Jains, took vows of non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, celibacy, and non-possessiveness. What's genuinely weird and profoundly impactful is how ahimsa became the cornerstone of Jain thought. To a Jain, every living thing, from the smallest insect to a human, possesses a soul. This led to practices like sweeping the path before walking to avoid harming tiny creatures, wearing masks to avoid inhaling them, and strict vegetarianism. Think about the mental shift required for that level of compassion. Jainism found particular appeal among the burgeoning merchant class, Vaishyas. Why? Because its emphasis on non-violence made it difficult for them to engage in agriculture, which inevitably involved harming insects and animals. Trade, however, was a perfect fit, allowing them to accumulate wealth without violating their core tenets, and in turn, their wealth often supported the monastic orders. But it was another Shramana teacher, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, who would initiate a movement that would sweep across Asia and fundamentally alter the course of human civilization. Born a prince in the Shakya clan around 563 BCE in what is now Nepal, Siddhartha lived a life of luxury until he encountered the realities of old age, sickness, and death. This profound realization that suffering was an inherent part of existence led him to renounce his princely life and embark on a quest for enlightenment. After years of intense meditation and ascetic practices, he achieved enlightenment under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, becoming the Buddha, the Paul and reads just quoted. His core teachings, encapsulated in the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, offered a middle way between extreme asceticism and sensual indulgence. The Four Noble Truths state that life is suffering, dukkha, that suffering arises from craving, tanha, that suffering can cease, and that the way to end suffering is through the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path: right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, provided a practical, ethical, and meditative framework for individuals to achieve nirvana, a state of profound peace and freedom from suffering and rebirth. Buddhism, like Jainism, challenged the Brahminical emphasis on rituals and sacrifices. It rejected the rigid Varna system, asserting that enlightenment was accessible to anyone, regardless of their social standing. This egalitarian message resonated deeply with ordinary people, with Kshatriyas and Vaishyas who felt marginalized by the Brahminical elite, and even with some Shudras. The Buddha taught in local vernaculars, making his message accessible, and his Sangha monastic community was open to all, including women, a truly revolutionary concept for the time. So, while Magadha was consolidating political power and building an empire, these new spiritual movements were fundamentally reshaping the inner landscape of India. They provided ethical frameworks, philosophical depth, and pathways to liberation that were independent of the old Vedic order. This wasn't just a religious shift, it was a societal earthquake, challenging the very foundations of tradition and opening up new possibilities for individual agency and collective identity. The stage was set. Magadha, now under the Nanda dynasty, a powerful, wealthy and militarily formidable empire that succeeded the Shishunagas, had amassed an army of staggering proportions. Estimates speak of hundreds of thousands of infantry, tens of thousands of cavalry, and thousands of war elephants. They had centralized administration, a formidable treasury, and an iron grip on the Gangetic heartland. They were the undisputed superpower of their age. But history, as we know, loves its dramatic turns. Just as Magadha seemed poised for unchallenged dominance, a young, ambitious, and utterly brilliant figure was watching, learning, and planning. He would soon emerge from the shadows, challenge the might of the Nandas, and forge an empire that would dwarf anything seen before on the Indian subcontinent. We're talking about the eve of the Mauryan Empire. We've journeyed from the quiet whispers of forgotten rivers to the bustling, fortified cities of the Mahajanapadas, witnessed the birth of revolutionary philosophies, and seen the relentless march of power. What comes next is an explosion of imperial ambition, a period of unprecedented political unity, and a cultural flourishing that would define India for centuries. Get ready, because the story of ancient India is about to get even bigger. We left off, didn't we, with the formidable Nanda Empire, a true juggernaut of ancient India, ruling from their magnificent capital of Pataliputra. They were, by all accounts, incredibly wealthy, possessing an army so vast it could make even Alexander the Great's battle-hardened veterans think twice. But wealth and power, as history so often reminds us, can breed arrogance. And arrogance, my friends, can be a fatal flaw. Standing in the shadows observing this colossus was a young man of extraordinary ambition and charisma, driven by a vision far grander than mere tribal leadership, and by his side a brilliant, if notoriously ruthless strategist, a true mastermind whose intellect would forge an empire. We are, of course, talking about Chandragupta Maurya and his mentor, Chanakya. Here's the thing that often blows people's minds. While the Nanda Empire was at its peak, a young Greek general named Seleucus Nicator, one of Alexander's successors, was consolidating his own power in the Hellenistic world, looking eastward. He inherited the easternmost satrapies of Alexander's vast, fragmented empire, which bordered the Indian subcontinent. The stage was set for a clash of titans, but first the internal struggle. Chandragupta Maurya, a man whose origins are somewhat shrouded in mystery. Some traditions suggest he was of humble birth, others link him to the Kshatriya warrior class, was a force of nature. He possessed the raw courage, the strategic mind, and the agnetic personality needed to inspire men. But even a force of nature needs direction, a guiding hand, and a blueprint for conquest. That's where Chanakya, also known as Kautilya, enters our story. Chanakya was a Brahmin scholar, a political theorist, and a master of statecraft. Legend has it he was insulted by the Nanda king, Dana Nanda, and swore an oath of vengeance, vowing to dismantle the Nanda dynasty. He saw in Chandragupta the perfect instrument for this ambition. Together, they formed an unlikely yet utterly formidable partnership, the warrior prince and the brilliant strategist. Think about it. A philosophical scholar and a military genius, united by a singular purpose. What kind of power could they wield? Their task was monumental. Overthrowing the Nanda Empire wasn't just about winning a few battles. It was about dismantling a deeply entrenched, highly centralized power structure. The Nandas had a reputation for tyranny, for their exorbitant taxes, and for their general unpopularity among the populace, despite their military might. This was the chink in their armor that Chanakya exploited. The initial attempts were, shall we say, less than successful. Early efforts to directly assault the Nanda capital, Pataliputra, reportedly ended in disaster. But Chanakya, ever the pragmatist, learned from defeat. He advised Chandragupta to adopt a different strategy. Conquer the peripheral regions first, gather strength, build a base of support, and then, like a river swelling from its tributaries, flow inward towards the heart of the empire. It was a classic quote, 5 approach, building momentum piece by piece. They began by recruiting local tribes, mercenaries, and disgruntled elements within the Nanda territories. They trained a disciplined army, instilling in them a fierce loyalty to Chandragupta. We imagine the quiet whispers of rebellion spreading through the villages, the clandestine meetings, the slow but steady accretion of power. It's a testament to their cunning and leadership that they managed to build such a formidable force under the very nose of the Nanda regime. Finally, after years of patient preparation and strategic skirmishes, Chandragupta and his army marched on Pataliputra. The city, protected by its massive walls and the formidable Nanda army, was a tough nut to crack. But the tide had turned. The people, tired of Nanda oppression, were reportedly more receptive to Chandragupta's cause. The exact details of the final battle are lost to time, but around 321 BCE, Chandragupta Maurya achieved the impossible. He overthrew the Nanda dynasty and seized control of Magadha. This wasn't just a regime change, it was the birth of something entirely new and unprecedented in Indian history, the Mauryan Empire. For the first time, a single political entity began to unify the vast and diverse Indian subcontinent. Think about the sheer scale of this achievement. Before Chandragupta, India was a patchwork of Mahajanapadas and smaller kingdoms. Now, a centralized power was emerging, poised to bring an enormous geographical area under one banner. Chandragupta's ambition didn't stop at Magadha. With Chanakya as his chief advisor, he embarked on a relentless campaign of expansion. We see him turning his gaze westward, where Alexander the Great's legacy was still fresh. Remember Seleucus Nicator, Alexander's general. He had consolidated his power in the Hellenistic East, including territories in what is now Afghanistan and parts of the Indus Valley. Around 305 BCE, Chandragupta confronted Seleucus Nicator. This wasn't a minor border skirmish. It was a clash between two of the most powerful empires of their time. The outcome? Chandragupta Maurya emerged victorious. The peace treaty that followed was incredibly significant. Seleucus ceded vast territories, including parts of modern-day Afghanistan and Balochistan, to the Mauryan Empire. In return, Chandragupta gifted Seleucus 500 war elephants, a powerful military asset at the time. This alliance was further cemented by a marriage, possibly between Chandragupta and a daughter of Seleucus, or another Greek princess, though the exact details are debated. What does this tell us? It tells us that the Mauryan Empire, right from its inception, was not just a regional power, but a major player on the international stage, capable of standing toe-to-toe with the Hellenistic empires. It pushed the Mauryan borders to the natural frontiers of the Himalayas in the north, the Indus River in the west, and deep into central India. Under Chandragupta, the Mauryan Empire became a marvel of ancient administration. Chanakya's influence was paramount here. He is credited with authoring the Arthashastra, a seminal treatise on statecraft, economic policy, and military strategy. If you're curious about ancient political philosophy, this text is a must-read. It's a pragmatic, often ruthless guide to acquiring and maintaining power, covering everything from espionage and covert operations to taxation, diplomacy, and the ideal structure of a state. It lays out a vision of a highly centralized bureaucratic state, where the king is supreme, supported by a vast network of officials and spies. we see the Mauryan state implementing a sophisticated administrative system, a vast bureaucracy, divided into departments responsible for justice, revenue, public works, and military. An efficient tax system to fund the enormous army and public projects. A powerful standing army, said to number hundreds of thousands of infantry, cavalry, and elephants, a testament to the empire's wealth and organizational capacity. An extensive spy network, keeping the king informed and maintaining control over the vast territories. Think about the implications of this level of organization. Standardized weights and measures, a common currency, extensive road networks facilitating trade and communication across the empire. It fostered an era of unprecedented economic prosperity and stability. Agriculture flourished, trade routes were protected, and cities grew. Chandragupta Maurya, after ruling for about 24 years, eventually abdicated his throne and, according to Jain tradition, embraced Jainism. He is said to have retired as an ascetic to Shravanabelagola in Karnataka, performing salakana, fasting to death, a highly revered practice in Jainism. This incredible transition from a powerful emperor to a renunciant offers a fascinating glimpse into the spiritual currents of the time and the profound impact of Shramana philosophies. His son Bindusara succeeded him. Bindusara continued the work of consolidation and expansion, pushing the Mauryan Empire further south, though the southernmost tip of the subcontinent largely remained outside Mauryan direct control. His reign, lasting for about 28 years, maintained the stability and prosperity established by his father. He also maintained diplomatic relations with the Hellenistic world, receiving ambassadors from the Greek kings. And it was during Bindusara's reign that we encounter one of the most intriguing figures in all of Indian history, his son Ashoka. In his early years, Ashoka was known for his fierce temperament and military prowess, often serving as a governor in various provinces and suppressing revolts. He was a formidable warrior, much like his grandfather. But the empire, now sprawling and magnificent, was about to witness a transformation in leadership that would forever change its trajectory, and indeed the course of Indian history. We've seen the rise of a colossal empire built on ambition, intellect, and sheer force. We've witnessed the birth of a unified India, a political entity that stretched further than anything before it. The Mauryan Empire under Chandragupta and Bindusara laid the foundational stones for an era of unmatched power and cultural flourishing. It was an empire whose sheer scale and administrative sophistication rivaled, and in some ways surpassed, its contemporaries in the ancient world. But the story of the Mauryan Empire, and indeed of ancient India, is far from over. The stage is now set for a new chapter, one that will see the empire reach its zenith under Ashoka, a ruler whose journey from ruthless conqueror to devout pacifist will become one of history's most compelling narratives. The foundations are firm, the power undeniable. What will this empire, this truly astonishing creation, do next? We're about to find out. Bindusara, the slayer of foes, had truly secured the Mauryan Empire's foundations, inheriting a powerful state and expanding it further. He consolidated the vast territories Chandragupta had won, ensuring the Mauryan grip stretched across much of the subcontinent. Yet, as with all great empires, the question of succession loomed large, and it was his son, Ashoka, who would not only take the throne but would redefine the very nature of kingship, leaving an indelible mark on history that still resonates today. Here's the thing about Ashoka's ascension. It wasn't a smooth transition. Accounts, albeit somewhat coloured by later Buddhist texts, whisper of a brutal power struggle after Bindusara's passing. Ashoka was not the eldest, nor was he initially the favoured son. He was a fierce, ambitious, and utterly ruthless prince, and he wasn't called Chandashoka or Ashoka the Fierce for nothing. Legend claims he eliminated all rivals, some say as many as 99 half-brothers, to seize the throne around 268 BCE. Whether the numbers are literal or hyperbolic, the message is clear. Ashoka's path to power was paved with blood and ambition. He was a conqueror in the mould of his grandfather Chandragupta, perhaps even more so in his early years. For the first 8 years of his reign, Ashoka continued the Mauryan tradition of expansion and consolidation. His empire was already vast, stretching from Afghanistan in the west to Bengal in the east, and from the Himalayas in the north to the Deccan Plateau in the south. But there was one significant kingdom that remained fiercely independent, a thorn in the side of Mauryan hegemony: Kalinga. Kalinga was a powerful coastal kingdom located on the eastern seaboard of India, roughly corresponding to modern-day Odisha. It was prosperous, strategically important for trade routes, and proud. Ashoka wanted it, and he decided to take it, no matter the cost. So, around 261 BCE, the Mauryan war machine, the largest and most formidable in the ancient world, marched on Kalinga. And what transpired was a cataclysm. The Kalinga War was a conflict of unprecedented scale and brutality. Imagine the sheer force of it. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers clashing, the din of battle echoing for miles, the land trembling under the charge of war elephants. We're talking about an engagement that, by Ashoka's own later admission, resulted in the death of over 100,000 people, with another 150,000 taken captive and deported. The fields were drenched in blood, the rivers ran red, and the cries of the wounded and the grieving permeated the air. It was total war, utterly devastating. And then, something truly extraordinary happened. After the dust settled, after the victory was declared, Ashoka, the fierce conqueror, walked the battlefield. He saw the carnage, the piles of dead, the weeping survivors, the utter desolation. The sheer scale of suffering, the hollow victory broke him. It wasn't just a battle won, it was a kingdom annihilated, a people utterly crushed. Standing amidst that devastation, a profound, utterly shattering realization struck him. The endless cycle of conquest, the pursuit of power through violence, brought only sorrow and destruction. This moment of epiphany, this seismic shift in his very soul, transformed him from Chandashoka, Ashoka the Fierce, to Dharmashoka, Ashoka of Dharma. He renounced war. Think about that for a second. The most powerful emperor of his time, at the height of his military might, chose to lay down his arms and embrace a path of peace. It's almost unheard of in the annals of ancient history. This wasn't a tactical retreat or a temporary truce. It was a fundamental change in ideology, a spiritual revolution that would redefine his reign, and indeed the course of Indian history. Ashoka converted to Buddhism. He found solace and guidance in the teachings of the Buddha, particularly the principles of non-violence, ahimsa, compassion, and the pursuit of righteousness. His new path, which he called Dharma, wasn't just a personal conversion, it became the guiding principle of his entire empire. But Dharma for Ashoka wasn't merely a religious dogma. It was a universal code of ethics, a moral law that transcended specific creeds: respect for all living beings, truthfulness, compassion, religious tolerance, social welfare, and obedience to parents and teachers. And how did he spread this message? Not with armies, but with stone. He had his principles, his dharma, carved into massive rock edicts and towering polished sandstone pillars erected across the length and breadth of his vast empire. These Ashokan edicts, inscribed in various regional scripts like Brahmi and Khahosti, are among the most important historical documents we possess. They are direct messages from the emperor to his people, outlining his policies, his moral code, and his vision for a just society. Imagine these monumental pillars, some 40 to 50 feet tall, topped with magnificent animal capitals: lions, bulls, elephants, polished to a mirror-like sheen, standing as beacons of a new philosophy. They weren't just declarations, they were public statements of intent, a constant reminder to his subjects and his administrators of the values that now governed the Mauryan state. These edicts speak of his remorse over Kalinga, his commitment to Dharma, his efforts to promote welfare, his calls for religious harmony, and his desire for all beings to live in peace. Ashoka became the greatest royal patron Buddhism had ever known, transforming a nascent Indian philosophy into a world religion. He didn't force conversion, but he actively encouraged the spread of the Buddha's teachings. We're talking about actively sending emissaries, monks, and even his own children, his son Mahinda and daughter Sangamita, to spread Dharma far beyond India's shores. Most famously, they travelled to Sri Lanka, where they successfully established Buddhism, a legacy that endures to this day. He also sent missions to Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and even parts of Europe, as mentioned in his edicts. He built stupas, dome-shaped structures containing Buddhist relics, and viharas, monasteries, across the land, transforming the physical landscape into a testament to his new faith. But Ashoka wasn't just preaching, he was governing with Dharma. His administration underwent a significant shift. Public works flourished, hospitals for people and animals, rest houses for travellers, wells dug, trees planted along roadsides for shade. He appointed Dharma Mahamatras, officers specifically tasked with ensuring the welfare of his subjects, promoting righteous conduct, and resolving disputes with fairness and compassion. He urged his officials to rule with kindness, impartiality, and efficiency. Justice, while still firm, was tempered with mercy, even to the point of reducing sentences for prisoners. Under Ashoka, the Mauryan Empire, already a marvel of centralized administration and economic prosperity, became an empire guided by moral principles. Trade continued to thrive, agricultural yields remained strong, and the vast network of roads and infrastructure allowed for efficient communication and governance. But now, the underlying ethos was one of peace, tolerance, and the welfare of all beings, not just the elite. Think about this. A king, once known for his brutal conquests, who, after witnessing the true horror of war, dedicated the rest of his reign to peace, morality, and the well-being of all his subjects. Ashoka's story isn't just a chapter in ancient Indian history. It's a profound human testament to the power of transformation, a legacy that continues to inspire us even today. He took the Mauryan Empire to its greatest territorial extent, but his true enduring conquest was not of land, but of hearts and minds, sowing seeds of peace and compassion that would blossom for millennia. His reign, lasting nearly 40 years, saw the Mauryan Empire reach its zenith, not just in size and power, but in its moral authority. But what happens when such a powerful, centralized empire, so dependent on the vision and strength of a single ruler, eventually loses that guiding hand? What happens when the architect of Dharma is no longer there to uphold its pillars? We'll see that even the greatest empires and the noblest of intentions have their limits in the face of time's relentless march. And so, we arrive at a pivotal moment, a turning point that often gets glossed over in the grand sweep of history. What happens when an empire built on the bedrock of peace, compassion, and moral principles faces the relentless, often brutal, realities of power politics? Ashoka the Great, Dharmashoka, had brought the Mauryan Empire to its absolute zenith, a beacon of enlightened rule. But what legacy does such a profound shift leave behind, and can it truly endure? Here's the thing about empires, especially those as vast and meticulously organized as the Mauryan. They require an extraordinary hand at the helm, a singular vision, and an iron will. Ashoka certainly possessed all of these, but his successors alas did not. Imagine, if you will, the sheer logistical nightmare of governing an empire stretching from Afghanistan to Bengal, from the Himalayas to the southern tip of the peninsula. Ashoka's genius lay in decentralizing some aspects of administration while maintaining overall control through his Dharma Mahamatras and a vigilant bureaucracy. But without his towering presence, that delicate balance quickly began to unravel. The successors to Ashoka, his sons and grandsons, proved to be far less capable. Some were weak, others indecisive, and none possessed the moral authority or strategic acumen that defined their illustrious ancestor. The immense economic strain of Ashoka's grand projects, the countless stupas, the pillar edicts, the extensive welfare programs, while noble, likely put a significant burden on the imperial treasury. And then there's the military aspect. While Ashoka's policy of ahimsa, non-violence, was revolutionary and inspiring, a state, particularly one of that size, still needs a robust defense. A military trained for peace, rather than constant readiness, might have become less formidable over time. Regional governors, always ambitious, began to assert more independence. The sheer distance from the capital at Pataliputra made effective central control increasingly difficult. The empire, once a tightly woven tapestry, started to fray at the edges. The curtain fell dramatically on the Mauryan dynasty around 185 BCE. The last Mauryan emperor, Brihadratha, was assassinated by his own commander-in-chief, a Brahmin general named Pushyamitra Shunga, right during a military parade. Think about that for a second. A public, violent overthrow of the very symbol of imperial power. It was a stark, brutal end to the first great pan-Indian empire, signalling a return to a more fragmented political landscape. Pushyamitra Shunga, a fierce proponent of Brahminical traditions, established the Shunga dynasty. This marked a significant shift in imperial patronage. Where Ashoka had championed Buddhism, the Shungas for the most part favoured the resurgence of Brahminical Hinduism. There's historical debate about whether Pushyamitra actively persecuted Buddhists. Some accounts suggest destruction of stupas and monasteries, while others point to continued Buddhist activity during his reign, even some patronage. What's clear, however, is that the state's official focus moved away from the Buddhist path. The Shunga kingdom was much smaller than the Mauryan behemoth, largely confined to central and eastern India. After about a century, the Shungas gave way to the even shorter-lived Kanva dynasty, a brief interlude before India plunged into an era of remarkable political fragmentation and, paradoxically, incredible cultural synthesis. But while the North was experiencing this political ebb and flow, let's cast our gaze south for a moment. Because as empires rise and fall, life, innovation, and indigenous power continue to flourish elsewhere. In the Deccan region, modern-day Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra, a powerful indigenous dynasty known as the Satavahanas, circa 2nd century BCE to 3rd century CE, rose to prominence. These were not just local rulers, they controlled vast territories, fostering a vibrant culture and economy. They were masters of both land and, crucially, maritime trade, connecting India's heartland to the lucrative routes across the Arabian Sea to the Roman Empire and Southeast Asia. Their coins often depict ships, a testament to their naval prowess. What's fascinating about the Satavahanas is their unique cultural blend. They patronized both Buddhism and Brahminical Hinduism, showcasing a remarkable religious tolerance. We even see some matrilineal naming conventions, where kings proudly bore their mothers' names, like Gautamiputra Satakani, son of Gautami, an intriguing glimpse into social structures. They would become a bulwark against the waves of foreign invaders that were about to crash onto India's northwestern borders. Because that, my friends, is the next act in our epic drama. The opening of India's gates to a succession of powerful foreign influences, primarily from Central Asia. After the death of Alexander the Great, his vast empire fractured, and in the region of Bactria, modern Afghanistan and parts of Central Asia, a Hellenistic kingdom emerged. These were the Indo-Greeks, or sometimes called Yavanas, and they were about to make their mark on India. Around the 2nd century BCE, these Greek rulers, descendants of Alexander's generals, began to push into the Indian subcontinent. Kings like Demetrius I and, most famously, Menander I, Milinda, established a series of small but powerful kingdoms in the northwest, often clashing with the Shungas and later the Satavahanas. Menander, in particular, is a fascinating figure. He's immortalized in a famous Buddhist text, the Milinda Panama, Questions of Milinda, where he engages in profound philosophical dialogues with the Buddhist sage Nagasena. This text portrays Menander not just as a conqueror, but as a deep thinker, eventually converting to Buddhism. Think about that. A Greek king steeped in Hellenistic philosophy, embracing the teachings of the Buddha. The Indo-Greeks brought with them a vibrant Hellenistic culture, which profoundly influenced Indian art, coinage, and even administrative practices. We see this most vividly in Gandhara art, a unique Greco-Buddhist style that emerged in the northwest. Imagine Buddha statues with flowing Greek robes, muscular physiques, and distinct facial features, often with a halo, looking more like Apollo than traditional Indian deities. This fusion of East and West is simply breathtaking, a testament to the cross-cultural pollination that was about to define this entire period. But the Indo-Greeks were just the vanguard. They were followed by the Sakzab, or Scythians, nomadic tribes from Central Asia who, pushed by other migrating groups, swept into India from the northwest around the 1st century BCE. They established several independent satrapies or kingdoms, particularly in western India, where the Seste, western satraps, would rule for centuries, often in conflict with the powerful Satavahanas in the Deccan. These Sakas too assimilated into Indian culture, adopting Indian names, religions and administrative systems, even issuing coins with bilingual inscriptions in Greek and Kharoshthi, an ancient Indian script. A brief interlude saw the Pallavas, or Parthians, also from Central Asia, establish a short-lived presence, but their impact was less profound than the waves of invaders before and after them. And then we arrive at the true titans of this post-Mauryan era, the most significant of the foreign powers to rule a substantial part of India, the Kanda Kushans. Originally part of the Yuezhi, a nomadic people from what is now western China, the Kushans were driven westward, eventually establishing a vast empire that, at its peak, stretched from Central Asia, across Afghanistan and Pakistan, and deep into northern India, encompassing parts of modern-day Uttar Pradesh. Their most famous ruler was Kanishka I, who reigned in the 2nd century CE. Kanishka is often called the second Ashoka for his fervent patronage of Buddhism, but it was under Kanishka that Buddhism underwent one of its most transformative shifts, the emergence and popularization of Mahayana Buddhism. Unlike the earlier Theravada, Hinayana tradition, which emphasized individual asceticism to achieve nirvana, Mahayana, great vehicle, offered a path to enlightenment for a wider range of people, introducing the concept of bodhisattvas, enlightened beings who postpone their own nirvana to help others. This shift also led to the widespread worship of Buddha images, a development that had been largely absent in earlier Buddhist practice, and which found its glorious expression in the Gandhara and Mathura schools of art fostered by the Kushans. Kanishka convened the Fourth Buddhist Council, though its exact location and details are debated, which solidified Mahayana doctrines and helped spread them across Central Asia and eventually into China via the burgeoning Silk Road. The Kushan Empire sat squarely at the crossroads of this legendary trade route, connecting the Roman Empire, Persia, India and China. This strategic position brought immense wealth, transforming their capital, Purushapura, modern Peshawar, and other cities like Mathura into bustling cosmopolitan hubs. Kushan coins are a dazzling testament to this syncretism, depicting a pantheon of deities from Greek, Zoroastrian and Indian traditions, reflecting the diverse cultures they governed. What's genuinely weird and utterly wonderful about this period, often dismissed as an quote, 13 or quote, 14 between great empires, is its incredible dynamism. It was a crucible where cultures clashed, blended and transformed. Buddhism, as we've seen, evolved dramatically. The Mahayana emphasis on devotion, the veneration of bodhisattvas, and the creation of iconic imagery made it more accessible and appealing to the masses, paving its way to becoming a world religion. Hinduism too underwent profound changes. This was the era where the great devotional bhakti cults, centering on deities like Vishnu and Shiva, truly began to take root, moving away from purely Vedic sacrificial rituals towards more personal forms of worship. The foundations of later temple architecture were laid, and the Apuranasya-rich mythological narratives celebrating these deities began to take shape. It was a period of synthesis, incorporating local folk traditions and deities into the broader Hindu pantheon. Economically, trade flourished like never before. Roman gold coins have been unearthed in southern India, proof of the vibrant maritime trade. Indian spices, textiles, and precious stones were highly sought after in the Roman world, while Roman wine and fine pottery made their way to India. So, while the Mauryan Empire's grand, unified vision faded, what emerged in its wake was not simply fragmentation, but a vibrant, multifaceted tapestry. This was a period of intense cultural exchange, religious evolution, and economic prosperity, where foreign influences were not merely imposed but absorbed, adapted, and ultimately made uniquely Indian. This crucible of cultures, this melting pot of ideas and peoples, was laying the groundwork for what many consider to be India's, quote, teen. But before we leap into that splendor, we must first understand the incredible alchemy that occurred in these centuries of transition. We just witnessed an incredible melting pot of cultures, a vibrant confluence of local traditions and foreign influences, all churning together in the wake of the Mauryan Empire's grand but ultimately ephemeral unity. The Kushans, those formidable horsemen from Central Asia, had carved out an empire that stretched from modern-day Uzbekistan to the Gangetic Plains, becoming pivotal patrons of Mahayana Buddhism and linking India directly to the Silk Road's pulsating arteries. It was an era of colossal Buddha statues, of philosophical dialogues that shaped world religions, and of an unprecedented exchange of goods and ideas. But, as is often the case in the grand tapestry of history, even the mightiest empires eventually fade. The Kushan Empire, for all its glory, began to wane by the mid-3rd century CE, fractured by internal strife and external pressures from rising Sasanian Persian power to its west. Northern India, once again, found itself in a period of political fragmentation, a mosaic of smaller kingdoms and nascent powers vying for dominance. It's a recurring theme, isn't it? The ebb and flow of empires, the constant dance between unity and dispersion. For about a century, the subcontinent was without a single overarching power, a time that might seem like a lull to the casual observer. But here's the thing about history. Lulls are rarely truly quiet. They are often pregnant with potential, brewing the next great epoch. And what emerged from this period of relative obscurity, rising phoenix-like from the decentralized landscape, was an empire that would forever be etched into the annals of Indian, and indeed, world history. The Gupta Empire. Now, if you've heard of the Maurya Empire, you might be thinking, quote, 16, and you'd be absolutely right. But this is where things get fascinatingly confusing and a little bit like a historical déjà vu. Our first major player in this new saga is Chandragupta I, who ascended to power around 320 CE. No relation to the Mauryan founder, mind you, but a man of similar ambition and strategic acumen. He didn't conquer a vast empire through sheer military might initially. Instead, he shrewdly consolidated his position in the fertile Gangetic Plains through a brilliant diplomatic marriage to a Lichchavi princess, Kumaradevi. This alliance with a powerful and respected clan gave him legitimacy and resources, laying the crucial groundwork for what was to come. Think of it as a strategic chess move, securing his base before expanding. It was Chandragupta I's son, Samudragupta, who truly unleashed the full potential of the nascent Gupta power. Reigning for nearly half a century, circa 335 to 375 CE, Samudragupta was, by all accounts, an extraordinary figure, a brilliant military strategist, a patron of the arts, and a skilled poet and musician himself. We know much about his conquests from the famous Allahabad Pillar inscription, a truly epic poem eulogizing his achievements commissioned by his court poet Harishina. Imagine this, a single pillar standing testament to a king who campaigned across virtually the entire Indian subcontinent. The inscription details how Samudragupta conquered numerous kingdoms in the north, then swept southwards, defeating a dozen kings in the Deccan and even further south. Though he wisely chose to reinstate many of them as tributary rulers, rather than trying to directly administer such distant territories. This was a smart move, ensuring loyalty without overstretching his administrative capacity. He was quite literally described as a hero. Quote 17. His empire stretching from the Himalayas to the Vindhyas, and from the Bay of Bengal to the Arabian Sea. He even performed the Ashvamedha, horse sacrifice, an ancient Vedic ritual signifying paramount sovereignty, minting gold coins depicting him with a lyre, celebrating his dual mastery of warfare and the arts. He truly embodied the ideal of a Chakravartin, a universal monarch, but if Samudragupta laid the foundations and expanded the empire, it was his son. Chandragupta II, circa 375 to 415 CE, often known by his title, Vikramaditya, who presided over what many historians affectionately call the war. Quote 18. This was a period of unparalleled prosperity, cultural efflorescence and scientific innovation that truly puts the quote 19 in ancient India into a new light. Under Chandragupta II, the Gupta Empire reached its zenith. He continued his father's policies of consolidation and expansion, most notably by decisively defeating the western satraps, Sakas, in Gujarat and Malwa. This victory was massive. It brought immense wealth from the lucrative trade routes of western India and access to vital ports, further boosting the empire's already thriving economy. Think of the Silk Road and the maritime spice routes converging, pouring riches into the Gupta coffers. Now, let's talk about why this era is called golden. It wasn't just about military might or economic prosperity, it was about the explosion of human ingenuity in virtually every field imaginable. Take the science and mathematics, war, for instance. This is where the Gupta period gave the world some of its most foundational concepts. We're talking about the development and widespread use of the decimal system. And the concept of 10 as a placeholder, yes, 0. Think about that for a second. Before this, calculations were incredibly cumbersome. The invention of 0, coupled with a place value system, revolutionized mathematics, making complex calculations possible and paving the way for algebra, calculus, and ultimately modern computing. It's a concept so fundamental to our world today that we often take it for granted, but its origins are firmly rooted in Gupta India. And it doesn't stop there. The brilliant astronomer and mathematician Aryabhata, born 476 CE, so slightly after Chandragupta II, but firmly within the Gupta intellectual tradition, proposed that the Earth rotates on its axis, causing day and night. He accurately calculated the circumference of the Earth, developed methods for calculating the timing of eclipses, and even suggested that planets orbit the Sun. This was centuries before Copernicus and Galileo. Can you imagine the intellectual climate that fostered such groundbreaking ideas? In medicine. The Gupta era saw the refinement of Ayurvedic practices. Texts like the Sushruta Samhita detailed complex surgical procedures, including cataract removal and plastic surgery, rhinoplasty for example, using sophisticated instruments. The Charaka Samhita laid out principles of internal medicine, diagnostics, and pharmacology. These were not primitive practices. They were advanced medical sciences for their time, far exceeding what was available in many other parts of the world. Then there's the hand, arts, and literature. The Gupta period is synonymous with the playwright and poet Kalidasa, often called the Ran, quote, 21. His masterpiece, Abhijnana Sakuntalam, The Recognition of Shakuntala, is a lyrical drama of love, separation, and reunion, celebrated for its exquisite poetry and profound emotional depth. His works, along with others from this period, set a benchmark for classical Sanskrit literature that inspired generations. Visually, the Gupta aesthetic is one of serene elegance and refined beauty. We see the emergence of the first freestanding structural Hindu temples, moving beyond the rock-cut caves of earlier eras. These temples, though many are now in ruins, display a harmonious blend of sculpture and architecture. The iconic images of Hindu deities, Vishnu, Shiva, Devi, began to take on the forms we recognize today, imbued with a sense of divine grace and inner peace. The breathtaking frescoes of the Ajanta caves, depicting Buddhist narratives with incredible detail and vibrant colors, though spanning several centuries, showcase the artistic zenith influenced by the Gupta style. Religiously, while Buddhism and Jainism continued to thrive, the Gupta period marked a significant resurgence of Puranic Hinduism. This was the era where the great Hindu epics like the Ramayana and Mahabharata were largely finalized in their current forms, and the Puranas, narratives of deities, myths, and rituals, gained immense popularity. Devotional worship, or bhakti, began to take deeper roots, focusing on personal relationships with deities like Vishnu and Shiva, leading to the construction of dedicated temples and the blossoming of rich mythological traditions. The Guptas themselves were predominantly Vaishnavites, worshippers of Vishnu, but they maintained a remarkable policy of religious tolerance, allowing other faiths to flourish. This was not an exclusionary empire, it was a culturally inclusive one. The administration of the Gupta Empire was generally more decentralized than that of the Mauryas. While the Mauryas built a vast centralized bureaucracy, the Guptas often allowed local kings and chieftains to retain a degree of autonomy, provided they acknowledged Gupta suzerainty and paid tribute. This system fostered stability and allowed for regional cultural expressions to thrive, contributing to the overall atmosphere. Prosperity was widespread, fueled by robust agricultural production and extensive trade networks, both overland and maritime, connecting India to Southeast Asia, China, and the Roman world. So, for about 2 centuries, the Gupta Empire shone brightly, a beacon of intellectual and artistic achievement that profoundly shaped the course of human civilization. It was a time when India truly led the world in many fields, a testament to human potential when conditions are right. But, alas, even golden ages cast long shadows. By the mid-5th century CE, the Gupta Empire began to face a formidable new threat: the Hunas, or Hephthalites, nomadic invaders from Central Asia. These fierce warriors, much like the Huns who plagued Europe, launched relentless incursions into India, draining the empire's resources and eventually breaking its back. Skandagupta, one of the later Gupta emperors, bravely resisted them for a time, but the continuous warfare proved unsustainable. By the mid-6th century CE, the centralized power of the Guptas had collapsed, giving way once again to a fragmented political landscape. The vast empire fractured into numerous smaller independent kingdoms. This wasn't a sudden cataclysmic fall like the Mauryan assassination, but rather a gradual weakening and dissolution under sustained external pressure and internal centrifugal forces. The post-Gupta period saw another attempt at reunification, albeit a short-lived one, under the remarkable ruler Harsha Vardhana, circa 606 to 647 CE. Harsha, a king of Thainsa, managed to bring a significant portion of northern India under his sway, creating an empire that rivaled the Guptas in extent, if not in longevity. He was an ardent patron of Buddhism, hosting grand assemblies and building stupas, and his court was visited by the famous Chinese Buddhist pilgrim Huanzang, whose detailed accounts provide invaluable insights into Indian society, culture, and religious life of the 7th century. Harsha himself was a celebrated playwright, demonstrating the continuing tradition of royal patronage for literature. However, after Harsha's death, his empire quickly disintegrated. The dream of a unified northern India would remain elusive for centuries. Instead, the landscape was increasingly dominated by powerful regional kingdoms. In the Deccan, dynasties like the Chalukyas and the Rashtrakutas rose to prominence, building magnificent rock-cut temples and developing unique architectural styles. Further south, the Pallavas of Kanchipuram emerged as a dominant force, renowned for their stunning monolithic temples and sophisticated naval power, laying the groundwork for the later Chola Empire. What we witness now is a profound shift. The focus begins to move from pan-Indian empires to distinct regional powers, each developing its own cultural, linguistic, and artistic identity. This fragmentation, far from being a period of decline, was a crucible for incredible diversity. It was a time when the roots of many distinct regional traditions, languages, and artistic forms that we recognize in India today began to truly take shape. The stage was being set for a new chapter, one where the South would increasingly come into its own, challenging the traditional northern dominance and contributing its own magnificent chapters to the story of ancient India. And believe me, the stories from these burgeoning kingdoms are just as astounding, just as awe-inspiring as anything we've encountered so far. The journey continues, always revealing new wonders. Okay, you've just witnessed the grand Mauryan dream of a unified subcontinent shatter, then a brief, brilliant flicker under Harsha Vardhana, only to once again dissolve into a patchwork of independent powers. We're now moving into a period that, for many, is overshadowed by the quote 23 of the Guptas, but trust us, what unfolds next is just as spectacular, if not more diverse and utterly breathtaking. Think of it like this. The grand central orchestra has packed up its instruments, but suddenly smaller, incredibly talented ensembles have sprung up in every corner of the land, each playing their own magnificent distinct melody. This is the era of the regional kingdoms, roughly from the 7th to the 12th century CE, where the idea of a single, overarching empire gives way to a vibrant tapestry of competing, yet culturally rich states. It's a time of intense political flux, yes, but also a period of unparalleled artistic, architectural and philosophical innovation. And where do we begin this journey into India's decentralized grandeur? We head straight for the south. You see, while the north was grappling with the aftermath of Harsha's collapse and the constant jostle for control, the Deccan and the far south were forging their own destinies, creating some of the most enduring and awe-inspiring monuments in all of human history. These aren't just temples, folks. These are entire worlds carved from stone, testaments to devotion, engineering genius, and artistic vision that will genuinely blow your mind. Let's start with the Pallavas. The Pallavas. From roughly the 3rd to the 9th century CE, with their capital at Kanchipuram, which, by the way, remains a city of 1,000 temples to this day. These were a dynasty of immense influence. They weren't just rulers, they were patrons of the arts and pioneers of a distinct architectural style that would come to define southern India. The Dravidian style. Imagine standing on the shores of the Bay of Bengal, the salty breeze in your hair, and before you, not just a single temple, but an entire complex of temples and rock-cut shrines, each one a masterpiece. We're talking about Mahabalipuram, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, sculpted mostly under the Pallava king Narasimhavarman I, in the 7th century CE. Here you'll find the famous Shore Temple, one of the earliest structural stone temples in South India, standing sentinel against the waves. But it's not just the Shore Temple, it's the Pancharathas, 5 chariots, monolithic rock-cut temples, each carved from a single massive boulder, mimicking different architectural forms. Think about that for a second. They didn't build with blocks, they sculpted the entire building out of the living rock. The detail, the precision, the sheer scale of the undertaking, it's astounding. The Pallavas also nurtured a rich literary tradition, with both Sanskrit and Tamil flourishing under their patronage, and their maritime trade networks were vast, connecting India with Southeast Asia and playing a crucial role in the spread of Indian culture, language, and religion to places like Cambodia, Java, and Sumatra. They were true cultural ambassadors, but as with any dynamic era, there were rivals. Directly to their north, dominating the Deccan Plateau, were the mighty Chalukyas. These guys, with their capital initially at Badami, Vatepi, were just as formidable, and their story is intertwined with the Pallavas through centuries of conflict. The Chalukyas, particularly the Badami Chalukyas, circa 6th to 8th century CE, were also incredible builders. If you visit Badami today, you'll find magnificent rock-cut cave temples dedicated to Shiva, Vishnu and Jain Tirthankaras, adorned with exquisite sculptures. However, for a real architectural treat, we need to journey a little further into their territory to sight Aihole and Pattadakal. Aihole is often called the cradle of Indian temple architecture because it's where the Chalukya architects experimented with various styles, almost like an open-air laboratory. Then you reach Pattadakal, another UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is simply breathtaking. Here you see a glorious synthesis, a harmonious blend of North Indian Nagara and South Indian Dravidian architectural styles standing side by side. The Kavirupaksha temple was at Pattadakal, built by Queen Lokamahadevi to commemorate her husband Vikramaditya II's victory over the Pallavas, is a jewel of Dravidian architecture, while the Papanatha temple, shows a clear Nagara influence. It's like watching two distinct traditions meet and create something entirely new and beautiful. The Chalukyas also had their own brilliant rulers, none more famous than Pulakeshin II, who, in the early 7th century, famously defeated none other than Harshavardhana himself, halting the northern emperor's southward expansion. Imagine the power and prestige that victory brought, but the wheel of power keeps turning. In the mid-8th century CE, the Chalukyas of Badami were overthrown by their own feudatories, the Rashtrakutas. And let me tell you, the Rashtrakutas were no less spectacular. Rising to prominence from their capital at Manyaheta, Malkhed, they inherited the Chalukyan legacy and pushed it to new astonishing heights. When you think of the Rashtrakutas, circa 8th to 10th century CE, one monument immediately springs to mind, and it is, without hyperbole, one of the greatest architectural wonders of the world, the Hakelasa Temple at Ellora. This isn't just a temple, it's an entire mountain carved into a temple. Yes, you read that right. Undertaken primarily during the reign of King Krishna I, this colossal structure was excavated downwards from a single, massive rock face, not built upwards. Imagine the sheer audacity, the engineering prowess, and the artistic vision required to chip away hundreds of thousands of tons of rock to create a multi-storied temple complex complete with courtyards, pillars, sculptures, and intricate carvings, all from a single piece of stone. It's a mind-boggling feat, a true testament to human ingenuity and devotion, dedicated to Lord Shiva, and it leaves visitors utterly speechless. The Rashtrakutas were also great patrons of Jainism, Shaivism, and Vaishnavism, reflecting the vibrant religious pluralism of the time. Now, while the south was busy carving mountains and building magnificent shore temples, what was happening up north? The north was embroiled in a fascinating, protracted struggle for supremacy, often referred to as the tripartite struggle. For nearly 2 centuries, from the 8th to the 10th CE, 3 major powers vied for control over the symbolic heartland of North India. Kannauj. Why Kannauj? Because it was strategically located in the fertile Gangetic Plains, a rich agricultural region, and controlling it signified imperial authority, much like Delhi would in later centuries. The 3 players in this epic struggle were 1. The Palace of Bengal and Bihar. East, emerging in the mid-8th century, the palace were fervent patrons of Buddhism, overseeing a resurgence of the faith in eastern India. Under rulers like Dharmapala and Devapala, they established and supported renowned monastic universities like Nalanda and Vikramashila, which became centres of learning for scholars from across Asia. Their art, particularly their bronze sculptures and palm leaf manuscript paintings, is exquisite. They were powerful, but their reach into the heart of North India was often fleeting. 2. The Pratiharas of Western India, West. Starting as a regional power in modern-day Rajasthan and Gujarat, the Pratiharas gradually expanded their influence. They were fierce warriors, often credited with successfully defending India against early Arab incursions from Sindh. Under kings like Mihira Bhoja, they became a dominant force, eventually capturing Kannauj and holding it for extended periods. They were also significant temple builders, contributing to the evolving Nagara style of architecture. 3. The Rashtrakutas of the Deccan South. Yes, the very same Rashtrakutas we just discussed, the creators of Kailasa Temple. Their involvement in the tripartite struggle demonstrates the incredible reach and ambition of these southern dynasties. They would often march north, defeat both the Palas and Pratiharas, capture Kannauj, and then retreat back to the Deccan, leaving the northern powers to regroup and fight over the spoils. This tripartite struggle was a fascinating dance of power, a constant ebb and flow, preventing any single empire from truly dominating all of India. It was a period of political instability, certainly, but it also meant that each regional power had to cultivate its own unique identity and legacy, leading to an explosion of distinct cultural expressions. This era, despite its political fragmentation, was undeniably a cultural zenith. We see the flourishing of distinct architectural styles, the Dravidian in the south, Pallava, Chalukya, Rashtrakuta, the Nagara in the north, Pratihara, later Rajput dynasties, and the Vesara style, a hybrid, in the Deccan. Temples weren't just places of worship. They were economic centres, educational institutions, and canvases for the greatest artists and sculptors of the age. We also see the continued profound growth of the Bhakti movement, especially in the south, where devotional hymns and poetry in regional languages like Tamil by the Alvars and Nayanas expressed intense personal love for God, transcending caste and ritual. This spiritual fervour resonated deeply with the common people and would continue to shape Hinduism for centuries to come. Regional languages themselves began to assert their literary presence alongside Sanskrit, laying the groundwork for the rich linguistic diversity we see today. As the 10th century approached, the Pratiharas, though they held Kannauj for a time, eventually weakened, paving the way for the rise of numerous smaller independent kingdoms, particularly the Rajput dynasties in north and central India. These warrior clans, fiercely proud and often engaged in internecine warfare, would become the dominant political force in the region for centuries, further solidifying the pattern of regional power centres rather than a single, overarching empire. So, as we close this chapter, reflect on this incredible period. It's a time when the grand imperial vision of a unified India took a back seat, but in its place, 1,000 vibrant flowers of art, architecture, philosophy, and regional identity bloomed. From the monolithic wonders of Ellora and Mahabalipuram to the scholarly halls of Nalanda, India was not just surviving, it was thriving in a decentralized, diverse, and utterly magnificent way. We've seen empires rise and fall, but now we're witnessing the birth of distinct regional identities that will shape the subcontinent for the next 1,000 years. And believe us, the story only gets richer from here. Alright friends, let's pick up right where we left off. The grand Mauryan experiment in centralized imperial power had dissolved, and even the formidable Harsha Vardhana, for all his brilliance, couldn't stitch North India back into a single cohesive entity for long. After his passing around 647 CE, we see North India settle into a period that some historians, perhaps a little too dramatically, once labelled the Dark Ages. But here's the thing that often blows people's minds. This was anything but dark. Think of it less as a collapse and more like a vibrant, energetic fragmentation. Imagine a magnificent stained glass window shattering, but each shard, instead of merely being broken, becomes its own miniature, dazzling masterpiece, reflecting the light in a new, distinct way. That's what happened across the subcontinent. North India became a mosaic of powerful, often warring regional kingdoms, the Gurjara Pratiharas, the Palas, the Chahamanas, the Chandelas, the Paramaras, and many more, each carving out their own sphere of influence, developing unique administrative systems, distinct architectural styles, and fostering their own regional languages and literatures. It was a dynamic, competitive, and incredibly fertile period for cultural growth. But while these struggles and innovations were unfolding in the north, our gaze, my friends, must now turn south, because down there, below the Vindhya mountains, something truly extraordinary had been brewing for centuries, and in this era it absolutely exploded into unparalleled artistic, architectural and political brilliance. If you thought the Mauryans were impressive, or the Guptas are, quote, 26, prepare yourselves, because the South Indian kingdoms are about to redefine your understanding of ancient Indian ingenuity. We're talking about a landscape where powerful, sophisticated dynasties like the Pallavas, the Chalukyas, and later the Rashtrakutas would not only dominate vast territories but also leave behind legacies that still stand today, defying time and gravity. Let's start with the Pallavas, who truly set the stage for much of South Indian history. Their story begins earlier, but they really hit their stride from the 6th to the 9th centuries CE, making their capital Kanchipuram, a shimmering jewel of learning and culture. Kanchipuram wasn't just a city, it was a metropolitan hub, a centre for trade, and a renowned seat of Sanskrit scholarship and religious thought, attracting scholars and pilgrims from across Asia. But it's on the coast, at D. Mahabalipuram, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, that the Pallavas truly announced their genius to the world. Here, amidst the crashing waves of the Bay of Bengal, they pioneered an architectural revolution. Imagine taking massive granite boulders and entire rock faces, and, instead of building on them, carving into them. We see the famous rathas, monolithic temples carved from single rocks, each resembling a chariot depicting various deities and architectural styles. And then there's the breathtaking Shore Temple, one of the earliest structural stone temples in South India, standing sentinel against the sea, an enduring testament to their vision. The Pallavas transitioned from rock-cut caves to freestanding structural temples, perfecting the distinctive Dravidian style with its towering vimanas, pyramidal towers, and intricate sculptures. Their art isn't just religious, it's vibrant, dynamic, full of life, telling stories from the Hindu epics with incredible detail and emotional depth. The Pallavas were also maritime powerhouses, maintaining extensive trade links and cultural influence across Southeast Asia, particularly in places like Java, Sumatra, and Cambodia. Their architectural and artistic styles, their Sanskrit scripts, and even their political ideas profoundly shaped the emerging kingdoms in those regions. Think about that for a second. The cultural ripples from Kanchipuram reached across oceans. But the Pallavas weren't alone in their grandeur. To their west, in the Deccan region, flourished another mighty empire, the Chalukyas of Badami, also known as Vatapi. They rose to prominence in the mid-6th century CE and became fierce rivals of the Pallavas, engaging in centuries of intermittent warfare that, while bloody, ironically spurred both sides to greater heights of innovation and defence. The most famous Chalukya ruler, Pulakeshin II, reigned circa 610 to 642 CE, was a true colossus of his age. he famously defeated the great Harshavardhana himself, preventing Harsha from extending his empire south of the Narmada River. What a clash of titans that must have been! Pulakeshin II's court was a vibrant centre, even receiving an embassy from the Persian king Khosrow II. The Chalukyas, too, were prolific builders, leaving behind an astonishing cluster of temples at sites like Aihole, Patadakal, and their capital, Badami. Aihole is often called the cradle of Indian temple architecture because it showcases an incredible range of experimental styles as architects tried out different forms and techniques. At Patadakal, a UNESCO site, you can witness a truly unique synthesis. Temples built in both the northern Nagara style and the southern Dravida style side by side, reflecting the cultural crossroads that the Chalukya Empire represented. Their cave temples at Badami, carved into red sandstone cliffs, are adorned with exquisite sculptures of Hindu deities, depicting a rich tapestry of religious devotion. The Chalukyas in many ways bridged the architectural traditions of North and South, creating a unique Vesara style that blended elements from both. Then, emerging from the shadow of the Chalukyas, around the mid-8th century CE came the Rashtrakutas. This dynasty, initially feudatories of the Chalukyas, overthrew their former masters under the leadership of Tyemd Danti Durga. The Rashtrakutas then established an empire that, at its peak, stretched from Gujarat in the north to the Godavari River in the south, becoming one of the largest and most powerful empires in India's post-Gupta era. Their capital, Manyakheta, modern Malkhed, became a centre of learning and trade. The Rashtrakutas were patrons of all three major religions of the time, Hinduism, Jainism and Buddhism, and their courts were home to brilliant scholars and poets. The emperor, Amoghavarsha I, reigned circa 814 to 878 CE, was himself a renowned scholar and author, writing in both Sanskrit and Kannada, demonstrating the growing importance of regional languages. But it is at Ellora, in present-day Maharashtra, that the Rashtrakutas leave us utterly speechless. Here they commissioned the Kailasa Temple, a monument that defies belief. Imagine not building a temple, but carving it out of a single massive piece of rock from the top down. This isn't just a temple, it's a colossal, multi-story, freestanding sculpture, complete with courtyards, halls, and intricate carvings, all meticulously chiselled from a single basalt cliff. It's a feat of engineering, artistry, and sheer human will that continues to baffle and inspire engineers and artists to this day. How did they do it? With what tools? And what incredible vision must they have possessed? It stands as perhaps the most spectacular example of rock-cut architecture in the world. Now, while these magnificent empires were flourishing in the south, the north wasn't entirely disengaged. In fact, the Rashtrakutas themselves became key players in what historians call the tripartite struggle. A fierce, prolonged contest for control over the strategically vital city of Kanauj in the Gangetic Plains. Kanauj, after Harsha, had become the symbol of imperial power in North India, and three major dynasties vied for its control. The Rashtrakutas from the Deccan, the Gurjara Pratiharas from western India, and the Palas from eastern India, Bengal and Bihar. The Gurjara Pratiharas, who rose to power in the 8th century, were formidable warriors. they played a crucial role in stemming the tide of Arab incursions into India from the west, acting as a bulwark for centuries. Under rulers like Bojatiamanya and Mahendrapala, their empire stretched across much of North India, and they were also great patrons of art and architecture, though much of their legacy has been lost to time. Their temples, when they survive, show a distinct northern Nagara style, often characterized by curvilinear spires, shikaras, and in the east, the Yas Palace established a powerful empire in Bengal and Bihar from the 8th to the 12th centuries. They were fervent patrons of Buddhism, overseeing a final flourishing of Buddhist monastic universities like Nalanda and Vikramashila, which became international centres of learning, attracting students and scholars from Tibet, Southeast Asia and beyond. Pala art, particularly their bronze sculptures and illustrated manuscripts, is renowned for its elegance and grace, reflecting a distinct regional aesthetic. This tripartite struggle was a fascinating, if often exhausting, game of political chess and military might, with Kannauj changing hands multiple times. It prevented any single power from truly dominating North India for an extended period, leading to a dynamic balance of power, but also to constant warfare. Beyond the grand political narratives and architectural marvels, this era witnessed profound cultural and religious transformations. The Bhakti movement, which had roots much earlier, truly blossomed in South India during this period. The Alvaskeen, devotees of Vishnu, and Nayanaskeen, devotees of Shiva, were poet-saints who composed passionate devotional hymns in Tamil, emphasizing personal love and surrender to God over elaborate rituals or caste distinctions. Their message resonated deeply with common people, making religious experience accessible to everyone, regardless of social standing. These hymns, compiled into collections like the Divya Prabandham and Tevam, remain cornerstones of South Indian religious tradition. And then we have the towering philosophical figure of Adi Shankara, often dated to the 8th century CE, a brilliant thinker from Kerala. Shankara was a pivotal figure in the revival of Hinduism. He synthesized and systematized the Advaita Vedanta school of thought, which posits the ultimate identity of the individual soul, Atman, with the ultimate reality, Brahman. His rigorous logic, profound spiritual insights, and extensive travels across India, establishing mathas, monasteries, in the 4 cardinal directions, revitalized Vedic philosophy, and profoundly influenced the future direction of Hindu thought. He truly was a unifier of ideas, bringing intellectual rigor to the devotional fervor of the age. So, you see, far from being a dark age, this period was a crucible of incredible creativity, political dynamism, and spiritual awakening. We witnessed the rise of distinct regional identities, languages, and artistic styles, yet all interconnected by shared cultural threads, trade routes, and philosophical currents. The temples of the Allavas, Chalukyas, and Rashtrakutas aren't just buildings. They're entire worlds carved in stone, telling stories, embodying devotion, and reflecting a society of immense ingenuity and artistic ambition. And as these powerful southern dynasties flourished and contended, another, even more formidable force was slowly but surely consolidating its power in the shadows, waiting for its moment to emerge and cast an even larger, more enduring shadow across the Indian subcontinent. But that, my friends, is a story for our next chapter. Get ready, because the Cholas are coming, and they are going to redefine naval power, bronze artistry, and imperial grandeur in ways you can scarcely imagine. We've journeyed through the rise and fall of empires, the clash of ideologies, and the blossoming of art and philosophy. We've seen the Pallavas, Chalukyas, and Rashtrakutas carve their legacies in stone and battlefields, and the tripartite struggle rage for control of the north. But as the curtain began to fall on some of these great powers, a new, even more formidable star was rising in the south, ready to assert its dominance not just over the subcontinent, but across the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean. Friends, prepare yourselves, because in this chapter we're about to plunge headfirst into the magnificent, awe-inspiring world of the Chola Empire. For centuries the Cholas had been a presence in the Tamil lands, mentioned in ancient Sangam literature as one of the three-crowned kings, alongside the Cheras and Pandyas. But for a long time they'd been overshadowed, often acting as vassals or minor players in the grand tapestry of South Indian politics. They were like a dormant volcano, quietly simmering, waiting for the perfect moment to erupt. And erupt they did. Around the mid-9th century CE, a chieftain named Vijayalaya seized Thanjavur, Tanjore, from the Muttarayas, who were Pallava feudatories, and established the imperial line of the Cholas. Think of it like a meticulous strategic reignition. From this humble beginning, his successors, like Aditya I and Parantaka I, gradually chipped away at the Pallava and Pandya power, laying the groundwork for what would become one of the most remarkable empires in Indian history. Parantaka Phidsil, in particular, was a fierce warrior, driving the Pandyas out of their capital Madurai, and even adopting the title Madurai Konda, conqueror of Madurai. But even he couldn't foresee the dizzying heights his descendants would reach. Here's where things get truly epic, where the Cholas transition from a powerful regional kingdom to a maritime superpower that would reshape the geopolitical landscape of Southeast Asia. We're talking about an empire that, at its peak, would control not just a massive swathe of peninsular India, but also Sri Lanka, the Maldives, and project its power hundreds of miles across the Bay of Bengal. Our story of imperial Chola glory truly begins with Rajaraja Chola I, who ascended the throne in 985 CE. What a name, right? King of Kings. And he absolutely lived up to it. Rajaraja wasn't just a brilliant military strategist, he was a visionary administrator, a patron of the arts, and an architect of an empire that would endure for centuries. If you've ever imagined a quintessential, powerful, benevolent yet utterly dominant king, Rajaraja I is probably who you're picturing. His reign, from 985 to 1014 CE, was a whirlwind of expansion and consolidation. He systematically dismantled the remaining Pandya and Chera strongholds, ensuring Chola supremacy in the south. But he didn't stop there. Rajaraja looked beyond the mainland. He launched audacious naval expeditions conquering the island of Sri Lanka, or at least its northern half, and even brought the distant Maldives under Chola control. Think about that for a second. Centuries before European powers were even dreaming of global empires, the Cholas were projecting power across oceans, establishing a naval supremacy that was virtually unparalleled in the Indian Ocean at the time. This wasn't just about conquest. It was about controlling vital trade routes and asserting regional hegemony. But Rajaraja's genius wasn't limited to the battlefield or the high seas. He was an administrative marvel. He implemented a meticulous land survey and revenue assessment system, ensuring efficient governance and a steady income for his growing empire. He strengthened the local self-governance structures that were a hallmark of South Indian society, empowering village assemblies, and Sabha, while maintaining central control. This balance of local autonomy and imperial oversight was key to the stability and longevity of the Chola state. And then there's the Brihadiswara temple at Thanjavur. Oh, my friends, if you ever get the chance to stand before this monumental structure, you will understand the sheer audacity and artistic brilliance of the Cholas. Completed around 1010 CE, this isn't just a temple, it's a statement. It's a testament to Rajaraja's devotion, his power, and the incredible engineering and artistic capabilities of his empire. Carved from granite, its Vimana, the temple tower above the sanctum, soars to an astonishing 216 feet, making it one of the tallest temples of its time. And here's the kicker: the Kalasam, the crowning stone on top, is estimated to weigh around 80 tons. How they managed to hoist such a massive stone to that height over 1,000 years ago, without modern cranes, is a marvel that continues to baffle engineers today. The temple is adorned with exquisite sculptures, intricate carvings, and inscriptions that detail Rajaraja's conquests and administrative decrees. It's a living history book, a stone symphony, and a UNESCO World Heritage Site for a very, very good reason. As if Rajaraja's reign wasn't enough, his son, Rajendra Chola Firuzakund, who succeeded him in 1014 CE, took the Chola Empire to its absolute zenith. If Rajaraja was the architect, Rajendra was the master builder who added new, breathtaking wings to the imperial edifice. His reign, 1014 to 1044 CE, is often considered the golden age of the Cholas. Rajendra inherited a powerful army and navy, and he wasted no time in using them. He completed the conquest of Sri Lanka, bringing the entire island under Chola sway for a time. But his ambitions stretched even further. In an astonishing display of military prowess, Rajendra launched a daring expedition northwards, deep into North India. His armies marched all the way to the Ganges River, defeating various kingdoms along the way, including the Pala ruler Mahipala I of Bengal. This wasn't necessarily about permanent territorial conquest in the north, but a powerful demonstration of Chola might, a declaration that their reach extended far beyond the traditional boundaries of South India. To commemorate this unprecedented victory, Rajendra adopted the title, quote, 35, the one who brought the Ganges and founded a new capital city, Gangaikonda Cholapuram, complete with its own magnificent temple, a worthy successor to the Brihadiswara. But Rajendra's most audacious and impactful campaign was his naval expedition against the Srivijaya Empire. In Southeast Asia, around 1025 CE, Srivijaya, based in Sumatra, controlled the crucial Malacca Strait, a choke point for trade between India and China. Rajendra's fleet sailed across the Bay of Bengal, attacking and conquering several strategic Srivijayan ports and territories in modern-day Indonesia and Malaysia. This was an incredible feat of logistics and naval power, transporting an army across thousands of miles of open ocean to engage a powerful maritime empire. Why did he do it? To safeguard and expand Chola trade routes, to assert control over the lucrative spice trade, and to project Chola prestige on a global scale. the Bay of Bengal effectively became a quote 36, a testament to their unparalleled naval dominance. The Chola administration was incredibly sophisticated. We're talking about a highly centralized bureaucracy at the top, but with significant local autonomy. Village assemblies mentioned earlier were vibrant and active bodies, responsible for collecting taxes, maintaining law and order, managing irrigation, and even administering justice. Inscriptions from places like Uttaramera provide incredible detail about how these assemblies functioned, with rules for elections, qualifications for members, and even disqualifications. It's genuinely mind-blowing to think about such advanced systems of local governance existing 1,000 years ago. The Cholas were also prolific builders and generous patrons of art and culture. Their legacy is etched in the very landscape of Tamil Nadu. Their Dravidian temple architecture reached its zenith, characterized by towering gopurams, ornately sculpted gateway towers, massive vimanas, the main temple tower, and intricately carved mandapas, halls. Beyond Thanjavur and Gangaikonda Cholapuram, countless other temples bear witness to their architectural prowess. And then there are the Chola bronzes. Oh, the bronzes! Using the ancient lost wax technique, Chola sculptors created some of the most iconic and exquisite bronze images in the history of art. The dancing Nataraja, Shiva as the cosmic dancer, is perhaps the most famous, a dynamic and profound representation of creation, preservation, and destruction. These bronzes weren't just static idols. They were often carried in processions, brought to life through ritual and devotion, embodying the vibrant Bhakti tradition that flourished during this period. The Cholas were also great patrons of Tamil literature. Poets and scholars thrived under their rule, contributing to the rich tapestry of Tamil literary tradition. Education, particularly through mathas, monasteries, and temples, was encouraged, fostering a vibrant intellectual environment. Economically, the Chola Empire was a powerhouse. Their control over maritime trade routes, coupled with a fertile agricultural base, thanks to advanced irrigation systems, including massive tanks and canals, led to immense prosperity. They traded extensively with China, Southeast Asia, and the Arab world, exchanging textiles, spices, jewels, and other goods. Their standardized coinage facilitated this commerce. But like all great empires, the Cholas too eventually faced their decline. After the reigns of Rajaraja I and Rajendra I, the empire saw a succession of rulers who, while still powerful, struggled to maintain the same level of imperial control. Internal disputes over succession, coupled with the constant resurgence of rival powers like the Pandyas, Cheras, and the rising Hoysalas and Kakatiyas, began to chip away at Chola authority. Over time, their hold on Sri Lanka weakened, and their influence in Southeast Asia became more tenuous. By the late 12th and early 13th centuries, the Chola Empire was clearly on the wane. The once subservient Pandyas, under dynamic rulers like Maravarman Sundara Pandyan and Jatavarman Sundara Pandyan, launched devastating attacks, sacking Thanjavur and Gangaikonda Cholapuram. The Hoysalas, a powerful Kannada dynasty, also expanded their influence, further squeezing the Chola territories. Finally, around 1279 CE, with the defeat of the last major Chola king, Rajendra Chola III, by the Pandya king Maravarman Kulasekara Pandyan I, the great Chola Empire faded into history. But to call it a quote 37 feels almost too simple. The Chola legacy is so profound, so embedded in the cultural fabric of South India and beyond, that their disappearance from the political stage hardly marks an end. Their administrative innovations, particularly in local governance, influenced subsequent South Indian states. Their architectural and sculptural achievements continue to inspire awe and devotion. Their naval prowess and maritime trade networks had a lasting impact on the Indian Ocean world, connecting distant lands and fostering cultural exchange. When we reflect on the Cholas, we're not just looking at a powerful empire, we're witnessing a civilization that mastered governance, art, trade, and even naval warfare on an unprecedented scale. They remind us once again of the incredible sophistication and ingenuity that flourished in ancient India, often far removed from the narratives we typically encounter. So, as we bid farewell to the imperial Cholas, we carry with us the echoes of their grand temples, the silent dance of their bronzes, and the whisper of their ships crossing distant seas. Their story is a powerful testament to the enduring spirit of innovation and the boundless ambition of human civilization. But the stage of Indian history never stays empty for long. As the Chola star dimmed, new regional powers were already vying for dominance, and the subcontinent was bracing itself for another wave of transformations, both internal and external. The narrative of ancient India, you see, is never truly over. It simply shifts, evolves, and continues to reveal new, astonishing chapters.